If there's ever a perfect example in NBA history of walking a very fine line, this moment was exactly it.
7-10 seconds remaining. Payton and Jordan having some words, face to face.
In the 1996 NBA Finals, it was the Bulls trying to capture their 4th title in 6 seasons, led by the most feared man in basketball, up against the young but very feisty Seattle Supersonics, led by a young daredevil who had already established himself as one of the top defenders of all time. But in the heat of the battle, the young Gary Payton tried to one-up the biggest star in the world, and it didn't go nearly the way he was hoping. While the on-court rivalry was beginning to take center stage, the backstory of Jordan and Payton's contentious relationship added fuel to the fire. It was a rivalry that had simmered for years, rooted in bad blood and relentless competition. But here's the silver lining to this all. Gary Payton and Michael Jordan weren't actually supposed to be contemporaries or two guys who'd go at each other. Heck, MJ went after literally every guy who dared to challenge him. But Payton was a late bloomer by all accounts. As Payton's talents blossomed, so did his confidence. He knew he had the skills to compete at the highest level, and he was determined to prove it even as an undersized guard who came into the NBA with little to no offensive game, not even in MJ's league. And see, the entire quote-unquote beef actually kickstarted during Gary Payton's first moments in the NBA. Here's the deal about GP. He was actually one of the greatest college basketball players ever. We remember GP as the only guard in NBA history who took home Defensive Player of the Year as the 2nd pick in the NBA draft, and his skill coupled with his ego made him one confident young player. In fact, his confidence was so high that he had the nerve to challenge the GOAT himself during a preseason game. When Gary Payton was playing in the first preseason game in his rookie year, he realized who that man was on the opposing bench, and he wanted to show the best player in the world a little something. He scored 19 points and was fired up. He was even trash-talking anyone he'd score on and ran past the Bulls bench to say something I can't really repeat in this video. But again, this was only 1990 and was only the backdrop to what would turn into a pretty competitive rivalry some years down the line. But for a rookie at only 21 years old to have the guts to go at a team like that said a lot. And here's the other thing. In the shadow of Michael Jordan's greatness, Payton often felt overlooked and underappreciated as the years wore on. The media's obsession with Jordan's every move made the feisty Payton feel some type of way, and he resented the fact that his own rise to superstardom went mostly unnoticed, especially for a guy who established himself as arguably the best defender in basketball. It was against this backdrop of personal interest and brewing rivalry that the feud between Jordan and Payton began slowly erupting as the 90s era wore on. And in the years leading up to their epic duel on the game's biggest stage, both players had it in for one another, especially as they were the leaders of their respective franchises, who happened to be two of the biggest offensive dynamos in the NBA. And then came the 1996 NBA season. Gary Payton was coming off his best season as a pro and coming into his own at 26 years old, while Michael Jordan was set to play in his first full season since he came back from playing baseball in 1995. MJ and Payton played 2 times during the regular season. The first game being in November, when the Supersonics handed Chicago just their 2nd loss on the season. The Glove had his best game of the season that night versus Chicago, scoring 26 points on 64% from the floor with 3 3-pointers, while MJ was held to just 22 points and only 6 of 19 shooting, as the scrappy Gary Payton-led Supersonics kept MJ's Bulls to just 28 second-half points. Well, that was Act 1, but then came their second and final matchup of the regular season in January. And Michael Jordan, as he often did, got his payback in a big way, dropping 35 points in 36 minutes with 14 rebounds as the Bulls wiped out Seattle by 26 points and kept Gary Payton to just 8 points. So, as for the regular season matchups, the matchups were split 1-1. But when I say that this was just the mere backdrop to what was getting ready to take shape 5 months down the line, trust me, it was only growing louder from here. Entering the season, the Bulls had the best odds of winning the NBA championship at plus 350, while the Supersonics had just the 7th best odds. But the thing was, Seattle blew everyone's expectations away. They not only won among the league best 64 games, but they boasted the first ever point guard to win the hallowed NBA Defensive Player of the Year award. That award went to none other than the 6 foot 3 inch tall, 180-pound Gary Payton, who was still in just his 6th NBA season. Oh, and here's the other thing. The last time a guard won the DPOY award was in 1988, when the award went to none other than, you guessed it, Michael Jordan. To say that there was something brewing between the lines between Mike and GP would have been a major understatement. They understood what the people were talking about, and even how both of them were being compared to when discussing the best guard defender in basketball.
Payton was saying something about the physical play, but I'm telling him just play. This is how you play in the finals. So it wasn't really any confrontation. They wanted to control the situation, felt it was out of hand, but it really wasn't.
Classic MJ. But before I get to those comments in the interview, let's start with a bit of context. Because just 60 or so minutes before that press conference was Game 1 of the 96 finals between, Jordan's 72-win Chicago Bulls and Payton's 64-win Supersonics. And that game kind of circles back to the clip you just saw at the very beginning of this video, because from the get-go in the series, there was no love lost between MJ and Payton. In fact, MJ and the Bulls absolutely suffocated the Supersonics and held Gary Payton to just 5 measly points, which is probably what led to the frustration, the pushing and shoving from Payton at the end of Game 1 when he finally grew tired of MJ hounding him all game long. This led to them going face-to-face, which led to those post-game comments by MJ I mentioned earlier. So here's the deal about what MJ said about his interaction with Payton toward the end of the game. He brushed it off. He said the refs just jumped to a quick conclusion in order to sort of outplay, and MJ said he really didn't pay any mind to the scenario as it was playing out. But guys, that's who MJ was. He didn't want to acknowledge you in public, in front of the media, or give any hint that you were in his head. But inside, you better believe MJ was an inferno. It seemed pretty silly of Payton to be going at MJ at the end of the game when his team was crushed, and with him scoring 5 points, and with his superstar teammate Shawn Kemp going off for 32. Maybe if Payton didn't play so horribly, the game would have had a different outcome. But that was just game 1 of the series. Surely, Payton would come out with a reinvigorated spirit the next game, right? Well, not exactly. I mean, MJ did end up with 29 on the night, but Payton helped keep him somewhat in check by holding MJ to only 40% shooting. But again, he wasn't nearly walking the talk on offense with only 13 points. In fact, 4 of his teammates scored more points than Payton, and they still lost by only 4 points. This would be a tied series going back to Seattle, at least. But instead, the Sonics were down 0-2, and spoiler alert, it wasn't going to get any easier from here. After the end of Game 2, the series was about to change, but not in a way many of us would expect, because you'd think MJ was getting ready to rip off an offensive masterclass, scoring basket after basket, relentlessly ripping out the throats of the Sonics. Well, he did, because in Game 3, MJ went for 36 and slammed the door shut on the Sonics, giving the Bulls a decided 3-0 advantage in the series. But here's where things hit a curveball, because Gary Payton snapped back to life in Game 4 and helped the Sonics live to see another day. And in Game 5, despite MJ's 26 and defensive masterclass on GP, holding him to just 38% shooting, the Sonics were able to outlast the Bulls again to push the series to a 6th game. And this game was by far the most interesting game in the series because, well, let me put it this way. If someone told you before Game 6 that Michael Jordan would shoot just 5 for 19 from the floor with 5 turnovers, you'd think the Sonics would force a Game 7 against all odds, because Gary Payton actually played well, scoring 19, dishing out 7 dimes, including 3 3-pointers. But the Sonics got up only 75 points and fell short of their historic comeback attempt. So, rewinding all the way to this moment right here, did Gary Payton make the ultimate mistake of trash talking and trying to get under the skin of Michael Jordan? Well, yes and no. He couldn't nearly back up that talk he did to start the series, but defensively, there were times he actually gave MJ a good deal of trouble, and other times, well, he got owned and simply couldn't keep up with the GOAT. But let's make one thing clear. Over all the years MJ was in the NBA, no man ever trash-talked Michael Jordan and actually backed it up.